10 years down the road, when these kids are adults and they come and talk with us, they're not going to talk to us about the wins and losses. They're going to talk to us about the things that matter the most to them, and it's about connection and being with those athletes in a way where they look up to you and you can speak life into them and you can show them an example, a positive example of how to be an adult.
Welcome to Unleash the Athlete, the podcast. My name is James Leith, and today I'm a guest on a podcast called Hoop Heads, and it's with a guy named Mike Klinzing, and we had a lot of fun. Episode was about 45, 50 minutes. We told a lot of stories. He's a really smart guy with a lot of experience, and I've been a fan of his podcast for a while now. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you're enjoying me sharing these interviews. Definitely check out his website if you're into basketball. It's got a lot of great stuff. So enjoy my conversation with Mike Klinzing from the Hoop Heads podcast. Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here this morning without my co-host Jason Sunkel, but I am here with James Leith from Unleash the Athlete. James, welcome to the podcast.
Hey man, it's good to hear from you. How
Absolutely. Are you? We're good. We're very good here. Excited to have you on. I've been a fan for quite a while. When I started writing my blog back in, I believe, 2014, discovered you through the Changing the Game project and John O'Sullivan, and been able to share a lot of the great things that you put out there for coaches at all levels. And so we're going to dig into some of that as we get deeper into the podcast. I want to start, though, by letting you give people an idea of your background in sports, just so they have an idea of where you're coming from. So talk a little bit about your experience as a kid in sports and just how that's kind of shaped what you've done as an adult.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I was a multi-sport athlete growing up. Grade school was a bit of a troublemaker. Had a lot of energy, and when I found sports, or sports found me, I found myself going to the principal's office a lot less because I didn't want to miss practice or a game or something. And so it really helped me to kind of focus on my studies and not get in so much trouble. I graduated middle school and went into high school, and my father basically just said, you have two options. You can be on a team or you can have a job. And so I just went from sport to sport to sport, and I was in high school 20-something years ago, so that was a lot more possible than it is these days, and acceptable. So I just played a lot of sports in high school, and I would try out one and finish the season and decide, okay, I'm going to do something else next time. And I ended up at the end of high school, I had played at the varsity level in 7 different sports.
Wow.
And I mean, I wasn't good at most of them, but the motivation to not have to deliver pizzas can actually provide a lot of desire to want to be on teams.
No doubt.
So yeah, football was my main sport. I played basketball. I wrestled. I played volleyball. I was even on the competition cheer team for a minute, just to kind of help the girls go to competitions, and we did stunts and stuff. It was a lot of fun. And went to college to play football, and I walked on and limped off, as I like to say. Barely had time for a cup of coffee, and I got hurt pretty bad. But the cheer team picked me up because of my experience in high school, and they paid my scholarship, and I ended up being the mascot at Fresno State for a couple years, which was a blessing in disguise. For the first year, I was bummed because I wasn't playing ball. But then the second year, I realized that I'd made a name for myself as an athlete. And so as the mascot, I would be in the huddle during the basketball games at Fresno State, or during the football games and the wrestling matches, because they knew I wasn't actually messing around. I was interested. So I got this front row seat to all these great coaches at Fresno State for years, because I was invited and I was able to stand there and listen what was going on. I immediately started coaching. I actually ended up playing football during college and after college at semi-pro level and arena football. But I knew coaching was where it was at for me. And so I took all those experiences, being on all those teams and being with the good coaches and the bad coaches, and started coaching. And I loved it. I loved every aspect about coaching except game day. the strategy, the got to put this player in and this player. That stuff I didn't like it, but I loved being in the locker room. I loved being on the bus. I loved tryouts. I loved practice. I loved the culture and building team and helping coaches to build up athletes. And I realized that's my strength. And so I went out back to school and I got my master's in performance psychology and committed to being a resource to coaches instead of being an actual. Now I still coach the youth, basketball and football, but when it comes to rising up in the ranks of high school and college and the pros, I just know my strength. And my strength is being a resource, and that's where I'm at today.
It's a really interesting story, I think, especially when you juxtapose it with the way that, unfortunately, a lot of our kids are growing up today. Here's you having played 7 varsity sports, and now in a lot of cases we're asking 7 and 8-year-olds to specialize and play soccer or basketball year round. And so I'm just curious to kind of get your take on the sports specialization discussion that's out there and just how playing all those sports impacted you. And then with the idea here that think about how a kid who has to specialize at 8 or 9, what you think that does to them emotionally, physically, just why it's so important to play multiple sports.
Well, I think we're in a very unfortunate situation where we're not listening to science and we're not listening to the professional athletes who are telling us and over play multiple sports. I've been blessed to work at the highest level in the Olympics and professional sports with athletes one-on-one, with teams. And more often than not, those athletes at the professional level will tell you they played multiple sports up until their sophomore, junior, even senior year. Some of them were dual sport athletes in college. And this isn't 20 years ago. This is 3 years ago. This is last year. You look at golfers, the top golfers in the world right now, we're multiple sport athletes. And we have parents who are ignoring science and who are ignoring anecdotal evidence that they're ruining their children by forcing them to play one sport all year long. And I was at IMG Academy for a while as the head of leadership development. And a big misconception about IMG is that all those kids are single sport athletes. Those kids, most of them come to IMG for a year or two as multiple sport athletes to focus on one sport. But they're sophomores, juniors, seniors. They had already played multiple sports. And so it's a misnomer to think that, that you were just born to be a baseball player. That's false. We're born to be active. We're born to develop. And so the 8-year-olds that I've had conversations with, I've never met an 8-year-old that says, I just want to play one sport. If you dig down deep, it's always pushed by the parents. And the parents think that they're doing well. So I don't mean to throw them under the bus, but they do need to get hit by the bus because
yeah,
the science flies in the face of their. So you know how in the gym there's bro science? It's like, man, you got to drink like 6 eggs and you got to do this and 12 sets of that. There's all this stuff and it flies in the face of actual science. Well, we got parent science too. Well, these parents are saying you got to be on this club and you got to do this and you have to sacrifice this kid's childhood for the hope of a scholarship. And by the time the kid gets to college, they don't want to play soccer anymore. They don't want to play baseball anymore. That there's nothing. And the other thing is, Mike, is that these recruiters from college are looking for the multiple sport athletes. They're not looking for single sport athletes. You get a baseball player that's played nothing but baseball until their senior year. That recruiter's like, that's it? We can't teach you anything. You know everything. So the psychology of playing one sport teaches a kid that they know everything. So they can't be taught when they get to college. It's a big problem. But if, like for me, when I was playing multiple sports, when I played basketball, well, that made me be able to get the jump ball as a receiver. When I wrestled, that made me a better ball carrier. When I played volleyball, that just made me meet people that I would have never spoken to before.
Right.
Because it's a completely different type of athlete. And if we had a pool, I would have been a swimmer. So I think we're doing a huge disservice to any young athlete saying you have to do this. It's very similar to saying you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a painter, you're going to be a dentist. And this 10-year-old is like, I just want to play with clay.
Right.
Like, can I go draw something? No, you can't, because we've got to go to, you're going to be the best violinist the world's ever seen. The kid's like, I would rather throw the baseball around. So we're teaching these kids that they're fixed for the rest of their life in this one sport. And then we think that they're going to be creative in other avenues. And they're not, because they're learning about life from adults. And when the adults, I feel like I'm standing up on a soapbox right now, but when the adults tell them you are this type of athlete, that permeates through the rest of their psyche. And I'm a fixed person. This is what I'm supposed to do. And there's no deviating from this plan that mom and dad have set for me.
And I also think that the danger there is that it becomes their complete identity. And as a result, if the success that the parent foresees for the kid or that the outside world sees for the kid doesn't materialize, that can be really, really difficult on a kid's psyche. And the biggest problem that I always have with the sports specialization is twofold. One that you talked about is parents, and then I think there's also that pressure from clubs, high school coaches, and there's people obviously doing it all different kinds of ways, and there's people that do it right. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that put pressure as adults on kids to specialize, and not just parents, talking more about on the coaching side of it. And I think that that's where the danger comes in, where it's the adult, whether it's a parent or a coach, making the decision for the child. Now, if the child says, as you pointed out, they get to IMG and they're in 10th grade and they want to be only a basketball player or only a tennis player, by that point, those kids have a pretty good idea of what they like, what they don't like, and what their goals are going to be. But a 7 or 8-year-old doesn't have that same life experience and understanding, and they haven't been exposed to as many things. And so I think that's the danger, is when adults start dictating to kids what they should be doing, as opposed to the adult, as you said, listening to the kid and just kind of getting a feel for what they want to do. There are very few kids in my experience that are 8, 9, 10 years old that want to spend 3 or 4 nights a week and all weekend doing one activity. Now there are some. There's a 1%, a 0.5%, whatever, that of kids that are like that, but 99.5% of kids would rather, as you said, be drawing or be running around or just playing with their friends and not being in this high pressure environment that we kind of force them into. And it's a challenge. It's out there for everybody, for sure.
Well, yeah. Well, the parents they're doing what they think is good for the
Correct.
kid, but they're not looking at it from a long-term perspective. One of the things that I've seen over the last 20 years is that youth sports has become the same entertainment that professional sports is. And there's a lot of different issues that stem from looking at professional athletes and then applying those principles and their psychological level to 10-year-olds. When you get to the professional level, whether you're dealing with female or male athletes, their psyche is very similar. And the similarities between the male sports and the female sports is just, there's not a lot of difference. But then when you apply that down and you compare a 6-year-old female athlete to a 6-year-old male athlete, the similarities aren't there anymore. But what we've done is we've come down and we're like, oh yeah, well, if it works at the professional level, you got the women's soccer team and the men's soccer team, professional level, let's apply those same principles to these 8-year-old children. And it's not applicable right there. And you take a professional practice schedule and then you try to implement that with 11-year-olds. It's like, no. Like when I'm with the Bulls, it's an hour practice or a 45-minute practice, and they get in and they get out. That's not a 12-year-old's experience. They're just not that focused. Plus, they're not getting paid millions of dollars to be the basketball player. And so you have to implement a little bit more fun, and you have to have some activities. And I know you and I have talked about the different activities that I've put up, and you've used them, and that gets them to love the sport. And
All right, so give us one or two of your activities, team building, that you can do with a youth sports team that's going to add to the fun, that's going to make them enjoy being a part of the team, that's going to make their practices more beneficial in your mind. What are a couple good ones that you like that you've used to great success?
Well, so I think we start with why do we use activities at these lower levels? And the why is because these kids are at school all day and they're dealing with the pressures of classes and homework and relationships and TikTok status and all this stuff that is really just like emotionally bogging them down. Then they get to practice. And then the coach is like, all right, you need to just forget everything that just happened and focus completely on basketball. Or it's right here, it's baseball, no more messing around. And that's not how a child works. That's not how human beings work. There has to be some kind of switch where they go from being that student to being in that playful athlete mind. We don't want our kids to be childish, but we want them to be childlike and have fun. We want them to be playful. And that's at the highest level. When you watch a LeBron James, or you watch like someone who is enjoying the game, they're at their top performance level. Well, that's where it's the same as kids. When kids are having fun, they're going to play better. And so when they get to practice, what I like to do is, because I still coach youth sports, and when I teach the coaches, is there's got to be some kind of switch. So for example, kids come to practice, they've got music in the locker room, so they're having fun. They know practice starts at 3:15, and they have to be on the court by 3:10. They get on the court, they have a couple minutes to adjust to being on the court. Now the music goes off, and we play some kind of game or do some kind of activity that activates their playful world. Silly things like rock, paper, scissors, cheerleader. That's probably my favorite. Have you done that one yet?
I have. So,
okay.
So I'll tell you the story. So I've done it. I've done it with mostly the coaching that I do now is with my own kids. So I've done it with every one of their teams. But I did do it one time when I was given a workshop for the Positive Coaching Alliance. And since I started the podcast, I haven't been able to do nearly as many workshops as I did. But I learned of the activity. I think I actually saw you do it in a video online. And I took it with a group of adults who were recreational basketball coaches. And there was probably, 50 or 60 people in the room. And, you're giving your presentation and you're trying to be engaging, and people are engaged, but not to the degree that they were once you get them up and doing rock, paper, scissors. It was fantastic. You wouldn't have, I'm sure you would have believed it because you've done it many, many times. But the fact of what these adults, how they go about getting into the activity, it was incredible. So go ahead and share what exactly it is.
So I did this activity at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, a couple weeks ago when the school first started. And I had 600 athletes on the day before their first day of school. And I cut them in half. They got 300 on one side, 300 on the other side. And I say, partner up. So they partner up, and I say, I'm going to turn the music on, and you're going to play rock, paper, scissors. Best 2 out of 3. And I walk them through, and I show, okay, rock, paper, scissors, shoot. And I said, but don't speed through it. When you win, celebrate. When you lose, recognize that you lost. Get ready, shake it off, and then go at it again. Whoever loses becomes the cheerleader for the winner, and now it's like their hype person. So now their hype person is going to go and find them the next battle. And so then they take their person over there, and then their champion wins that match again. So now they've got 4 people in their hype group. And you go around, and eventually you've got one champion from one side and one champion from the other side. And the energy in the room is blowing off the ceiling. It's going absolutely nuts. And it's a lot of fun, and the music's going. And so I make a big deal out of bring me your champion and bring me your champion. And they come in, and everybody's cheering, and we go best 2 out of 3. And we go 1, 2, 3, shoot. And they shoot. One team has 1 point. The other team has 0. They're celebrating high, and the other team is like, oh, we're going to be all right. And the energy in the room is so crazy. Finally, when somebody wins, everybody celebrates. You shake hands. They're all excited. You get them lined up, and now you can teach them anything you want because they're ready. You taught them a few things. You taught them that it's okay to celebrate your teammates. It's okay to be excited in a culture where being excited is looked at as, oh man, just calm down. You're too excited. It's like, no. Nothing great ever happened without enthusiasm. So let's practice enthusiasm. And what happens is that you can use this, and I use this when I work with teams, as an anchor to when you're at halftime a couple weeks from now, you can go, remember the energy that you had during that rock, paper, scissors cheerleader activity? Close your eyes, find that energy, and let's go out in the second half and do some damage to this team. Like, let's go all out. And so they remember that experience. And so that's just one of many activities that you can do to get these kids in a childlike state ready to play, instead of just assuming that after 30 minutes of warming up and doing all this stuff and just quietness in the gym, that the kids are just going to turn it on and be like, yeah, let's go. Let's go all out. That's not how people work. And so you got to get them excited, give them a reason to kind of dig deep and go, yeah, I'm going to go all out in practice.
It's great. I mean, anybody who's out there listening, I've done it with, like I said, all my teams since I learned about it. I've done it on a bigger scale. It's so much fun. Like, I have an older daughter who right now she's in 10th grade. And so she's played AAU basketball with the same group of girls now for, and I think 3 years. And after the first time we did it, like, it was inevitable that in the next practice or the next practice, somebody on that team is coming up to me saying, hey, can we play rock, paper, scissors again, coach? Can we do that again? And that's when you know that you've hit on an activity that they like, and that that's all part of what makes things special. It really is. When you can get them to bond together, to be a part of it, and it just leaves everybody with a smile on their face. And then to your point, you're able to then go back and you're able to reference it. And that really makes all the difference. Coaches, check out these new offerings from Tyler Whitcomb Basketball Coaching Courses. First, Anthony Grant and the red-hot Dayton Basketball Playbook. This is the number 5 offense in the nation according to KenPom. The Anthony Grant Dayton Basketball Playbook by Farshad Alemi is only $11.97. Second, the Mike Young and Virginia Tech's Offensive Playbook. Learn from one of the hottest coaches in the nation, Mike Young, the 2019 Sporting News Coach of the Year. Young finished 3rd in last season's Associated Press Coach of the Year voting behind Texas Tech's Chris Beard and Houston's Kelvin Sampson. Finally, the Continuity Corner 5 offense from Tyler Whitcomb. It's only $19.97 for this one-of-a-kind offense. In this course, you'll have video and diagrams to show you the offense with shooting drills and post drills to make the offense very tough to defend. Why choose CC5? Positionless basketball. All 5 players will be able to shoot and post. Guards have a hard time defending in the post. Bigs have a hard time coming out and guarding on the perimeter. You'll see a post-to-corner 3-point attack with backscreen and cut options, and the continuity is very easy to install. Visit coachtube.com/users/Tyler Whitcomb to check out these great resources.
Even at the professional level, when I'm working with professional teams, and I'll go back. Last week, I was in Chicago, and one of the guys was like, "Can we play Zip Zap Zop, Coach?"
Yeah,
this is a grown man that is getting paid lots of money to play a game at a level that I just will never achieve. And he's like, "Can we play Zip Zap Zop?" Which is a game that I learned in college. I'll just leave it at that. Like, I played it in college, right? But like, it was just, it was great. And so I go, yeah, let's do it. And so we play it, and it takes about 5 or 6 minutes. And then I look over at the coach, and the coach is thrilled because his players are ready to go. They're ready to play. And so adding these activities, just 5 or 6 minutes at the beginning of practice, gets the athletes something to look forward to, and gets them a way to kind of shift their mindset from the drudgery of all the stuff that they did before and the monotony of school and all this stuff. And, you know, school's great and everything. I'm not saying that it's not great.
Right.
But,
Understood.
But it's just, as adults, we forget what it was like to be sitting in those hard seats all day, and all the temptations and the distractions. And I'm on this, I have this unhealthy obsession with Mr. Rogers. and I have for years. And the thing that I love about him the most is that he never forgot what it was like to be a child. He always was able to look at the world through the eyes of a child. And as coaches, we have to remember what it's like to be an athlete, and that these are not professional athletes getting paid to play a sport. These are kids with families and problems, and their sport is a lot of times their escape from all the stuff that's happening outside of the court.
Yeah, it's so true. I know you had a story. I can't remember which where I read it or which coach notes it was part of, but you talked about a time when you were coaching, I think it was a girls' youth basketball team, and you were debating whether or not to work on a press breaker or have some birthday cake.
Yeah, so it was my birthday. It was February 12th, and we were it was a 6th grade girls basketball team. And we got about half an hour into practice, and we took a water break. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to my assistant, and the parents came in with cupcakes and wanted to celebrate my birthday. And I really needed to put in the press break that week because I knew the team we were going to play on Saturday was going to press us like crazy. And I sat down with the girls and I was like, hey, this is great. I'm so appreciative. I know that we have some stuff that we need to learn. Do you guys want to, let's get back to practice? And I could just see on their face that they just wanted to hang out with their coach. And so I said, you know what? Hey, let's just hang out. And so for the rest of practice, we sat there, and the girls, they taught me about these games that they played in school, and some of them were talking about their teachers, and they had so much fun. Now, we didn't install the press break, but the next day at practice, they were so excited to be at practice. It was like it kind of, they looked forward to it. And I was able to install a little bit, but I talked to two of them about 3 years ago. And what was funny is I told the story through a coach note, and then a junior English teacher responded and said, 2 of the girls from your story are in my class right now. And so that coach FaceTimed me, and I got to talk to those 2 girls, which was really cool because I was living in a different state, and they brought up that story of, Coach, you remember when it was your birthday and we brought you cupcakes and you hung out with us? That's all they wanted to talk about. We didn't talk about the games we won or lost. We didn't talk about anything. They were just like, do you remember that, Coach? I said, yes, I remember that. It was awesome. And it reminded me that 10 years down the road, when these kids are adults and they come and talk with us, they're not going to talk to us about the wins and losses. They're going to talk to us about the things that matter the most to them, and it's about connection and being with those athletes in a way where they look up to you and you can speak life into them and you can show them an example, a positive example of how to be an adult.
Yeah, the most important thing that I think people remember when you go back, and I think about my own athletic career, you talk to the number of people that we've talked to on the podcast, and you ask them about, hey, what's your favorite memory from playing your sport in high school? Or what do you remember about your athletic career? And inevitably, what they say is not, oh, I remember we won this championship game here. It's they remember their teammates, or they remember this bus ride, or they remember, a team meeting, or they remember a conversation that they had with a coach. And it's really just like, we talked to a guy last night, Lee Wimberly, who's a coach in Arkansas, high school basketball coach. And I asked him sort of the same question that I asked you to start off, like, hey, how did you get into the game of basketball as a kid? What was your athletic background like? And he was going through and he was talking. And at one point he said, when he was a baseball player growing up, and then as he got into high school, he sort of transitioned, still played baseball, but basketball became his thing. And they got a new basketball coach at his high school when he was in 9th grade. And the first thing he said was, this coach came in, and what I remember is he spent time with me. Didn't say, hey, this guy was great at teaching me how to shoot a jump shot, or this guy really knew his X's and O's and he helped our team win. What he remembered was, this guy spent time with me. And there's nothing, I think, more powerful to hear as a coach than a story like that, where sometimes we do get caught up in the X's and O's. We get caught up in the wins and losses, and every coach does it. I mean, those things hang with you. If you coach, I don't care if you're coaching 3rd graders or you're coaching the Chicago Bulls, every game is important to you and you get caught up in it. but it's really, really important to remember that your athletes, as you said, are coming at it from a different perspective, especially at a younger age. They're, they're much more focused on the fun aspects and the connections and being with their friends and all those kinds of things. And it's important as adults that we remember and recognize those situations. And that just made me think, hey, this guy spent time with them, and that's what matters. That's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it.
All right. So the other thing that I like that I've done that you've used before is sort of your beginning of the season activity where you have the kids write down characteristics of what a great teammate would be. And I believe your team was called the Suns that you wrote the article about.
Oh, yeah.
And I've used that now pretty much ever since I learned of the activity. I've done it with pretty much every team I've coached. And then what I've done with my AAU basketball teams with my own kids is I've put together little notebooks. And then that sheet that the kids sign and write down some characteristics of great teammates, that's always the cover sheet of the notebook that we put together as we do little lessons throughout the season. So just talk a little bit about how you came up with that, why you came up with it, and why you think it's so important and has such a big influence on teams that you've been able to coach.
Yeah, I love that you use that. That happened kind of accidentally. I was with actually the same cupcake team, but that was the Suns. We had like a day where it was kind of built in, which is kind of cool for the YMCA to do this, but it was built in a team building day. So we had about an hour with your new team to kind of figure out what you wanted to do and who you wanted to be. And I just had this blank piece of paper and I said, describe to me in one word what a great teammate is. And so I went through each girl and they all gave me a word and I wrote them down. And then I turned it around and I said, does everybody agree that this would be a great teammate? And they all said, yeah. And I said, well, how about this? If you commit to being these things, then there's a section here at the bottom, sign your name. And that means that you agree that this is what we're going to be as the Suns. And they loved it. And they were all signing their names. And I gave them different colors and stuff. And then we had that. And I said, okay, we need a cheer. We need a yell. No idea is dumb. What do you got? And they just started throwing things out here and there. And then someone just said, fun in the sun. Like, that's it. Here we go. So then every time we broke for anything, it was like, here we go. Let's get a break. 1, 2, 3. Fun in the sun. And that was our thing. Fun in the sun. And all year long, I had that paper, that same exact paper on the back of my clipboard, except it was like a see-through clipboard. And so then I flipped the paper over. So whenever I was writing something on the clipboard, the girls could see that. And it was a constant reminder to be a good teammate. And so they would police each other. If somebody was being selfish, and we would talk at the end of practice and be like, all right, is there anything that we need to talk about? Is there any themes from this paper that we're lacking? And sometimes somebody would be like, I feel like as a team we're being selfish. Like, okay, great, let's talk about that. And so then that would be our talk, that post-practice talk. Instead of me giving this dissertation on why we need to work harder, one of the girls said, we're being selfish. Like, okay, well, let's solve that right now. And so it gave us stuff to talk about at the end of practice to develop us as a team instead of me just throwing out, let me tell you a story about Vince Lombardi, and they're just like, what? Like, let's talk about us, because that's the most important thing to kids is like, what's going on with us? How are we growing? Do you see me, coach? Did you see me do this thing? Am I getting better? Have you noticed that? Those are kind of things that these kids, they want to hear from us.
And it comes from them. I think that too is powerful, that it's not a coach pontificating about, hey, this is what we need to do. This is what a great teammate is. And certainly we can share those things. But when it comes from the kids know, like I just did it with my 4th grade daughter's team this year. And they made a list of like, I don't know, I had each group do 6. And there were a couple overlaps, but we ended up with, I think, 8 characteristics of a great teammate. And they're all ones that I would have come up with if it was me sharing it. But here's a group of 4th grade girls who have limited experience in sports, and they came up with a great list of 8. And now, to your point, I've got that sheet. We look at it. We talk about it. When things happen, we can say, hey, did we agree that this was going to be something we're going to do? Well, then we need to do that. And then you get those conversations going. it's a really, really powerful activity that, again, it takes almost no time at all. I mean, I took 15 minutes on the very first practice to send them into 2 groups and talk and write their things down. And then I put it onto a form. I typed it up once we had all those things together and then had them all sign it. And now they've all got their own copy. I've got my copy, and everybody has it. And I always laugh because coming up with the little cheer is hilarious, especially the younger they are, because then the longer those cheers get.
Which is great.
It's funny. I'm like, I don't know if we can say that 27-word cheer, every time we're breaking a huddle. So we might want to shorten that. I like the idea. So ours this year is 1, 2 together, 3, 4 forever, which I thought that was pretty solid. So it's fun. And then they all fight over who gets to say the numbers. So we have one person, we pick one person who does the numbers, and everybody else does the other stuff. They're like, gotta say the numbers. So again, it keeps them engaged. It's fun. They love it, and it's something that they're gonna remember. And that's really what it's all about, for sure.
I love what you said. It took 15 minutes. And that's the argument that I get in with these coaches that are like, yeah, but those 15 minutes, we got to do a layup drill. That's so important to their development as a human. It's like, no. It's really not, because, and it happens even at the professional level. I'll walk in and like these coaches will bring me into audit practice and be like, how can we be more efficient? And, we're in basketball season. So if I'm going in and working with a basketball team and I see them at the end of practice shoot around for 15 minutes. Well, first, if they don't have music on, then it's really boring. But if they do have music on, now the players are kind of dancing. It's like, how is that practice, that shot, making you better? If you're not being intentional about those shots and you're just shooting for 15 minutes, it's not actually helping. It might actually be a detriment to your shot because you're being lazy about it.
Right.
And so those 15 minutes that are so precious that we can't do these activities because we're wasting time, you've got it twisted, is that you're going to get a more focused athlete by being intentional about putting them in the mindset to be able to do those fundamentals, to be able to do those routine activities during practice of the layup and the basketball dribble and all this other stuff. If they're not mentally there and they're kind of mentally checked out, well, they're not really, building any myelin in the muscle memory, and they're not really getting any better. And so take a couple minutes, get them in the right mindset, and then become a better basketball team.
And we all know that the science says that if players are more connected with each other and with their coaches, that not only is that a positive for them as human beings, but it also oftentimes translates to more success on the scoreboard, which, the coaches are presenting that argument to you against it. That's what they're concerned about, that, if we take time to do that, we're missing out on this skill development work or this, this team stuff that we got to get done. And ultimately it pays off in spades, both in terms of the impact that you have on your players, but also I think it ends up having a positive impact. There's plenty of science out there that says that it also has a positive impact on the scoreboard. And I think that's where all coaches, I think we're much better at it as a coaching profession than we were 15 or 20 years ago. I think there's just so much more information out there about how important this stuff is. And I think you are on the front line of it. You're seeing people that are starting to, who maybe 10 years ago would have kind of, sloughed it off and said, I'm not sure. Now, at least those people are starting to look at it and say, hey, maybe this is something I got to think about and consider. And I think it's just made sports and coaching, it's made it a much more positive environment for the players who are playing the games.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of good things right there. There's 2 things that build connection. And you can be very intentional about building connection between players. Great teams have 2 things. They have a shared language. So I could yell a state and a number, and the kids know this is the play we're going to run. So they have that shared language. But the other thing is they have inside jokes. And those are so important as the glue to bring teams together. And they can save your team. So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was at IMG, and I was working with girls soccer, and one of the players was an example in one of my activities. We did this improv game, and she said something about a purple duck, and that purple duck, it became this funny thing. Anytime somebody would say it, everybody would laugh. So the next day we were on the soccer pitch, and one of the girls she just got annihilated by an opponent, just knocked down totally intentionally to take her out. And this girl got up with this, she was seeing red. She was ready to murder this other person. And she starts walking towards that person and then starts jogging. And now she's in a full sprint because the girl had gone to the other side of the field. And one of the players from the bench stood up, and I'm sitting right there. She stood up and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Purple duck!" And I watched this girl who was about to get kicked out of the game for retribution, right, going after, and she stopped in her tracks, looked over at Tate, and smiled, turned around, and went to her spot. It completely changed the course of the game because, this player didn't get a red card, didn't get kicked out, all because of a stupid activity that we played the day before that saved them. And that became their way to de-escalate tension the rest of the season. Purple Duck.
It's amazing that the impact of something that when you hear that from the outside, you're like, come on, that can't be. And yet we all know, anybody who's been on a team, that there are those little things. There is that shared language. There is those common bonds, that things that you've gone through that everybody remembers, that everybody can relate to. And I think that's so important. There's a guy who, he is a coach at Queen's University in Charlotte, and we had him on, Bart Lundy, and he talked about, he creates basically a dictionary of the language for his team. And so anybody who's new to the program, freshman or somebody who transfers in, they get a copy of this team dictionary that has all those shared languages and stories and things that are important in their program. And, again, I think that people, as coaches, we try to communicate those things, but a lot of times we do it verbally. And I just thought that was very cool that he put it down in writing and that everybody got a copy. And he said, we want it to be special. We want it to be something that only we share. That's not something that, there's things that aren't for outside consumption. There's things that are only for us. And that's what's going to be in this, that's what's going to be in this document, in this dictionary of our program. And I just thought that was a very cool. I'd never heard anybody say that they actually put it down in writing and shared it with everybody who was part of the program. And that kind of goes to exactly what you're talking about. Next thing that I want to talk about, the you, me, we activity, whether it's after practice or after a game, to help build up positive team culture. Talk a little bit about what that activity is, because I think that's something that is very easy for coaches to put into place and utilize their team. And I think it's it's powerful at all levels, but I think it's especially powerful at the youth level, where kids sometimes aren't used to talking and aren't comfortable sharing. And I think this gets them out of their shell. So talk a little bit about that activity, if you could.
Yeah. Well, I was in high school and I was a senior. I was on this volleyball team, and we had a coach who she was really good at highlighting things that went well during practice. And the way she did it was, we would all get in a circle in the middle of the court, and she would just seemingly at random point at someone, and you had to respond with whatever she asked you. And so the first one, she would point at someone and said, "You." And what that person would do is they would have to find someone. So like if she pointed at me and just said, "You," I would have to look across the circle and go, Eric right there. I saw how he was hustling today, and I saw that ball that he dove for and through the chairs, and I was so impressed with you, Eric. Well done. And then we'd all clap. And then she'd go, "Okay, Clint," and would point at Clint. And then if she said your name, then you would have to say something that you did good. So Clint would be like, "Oh man, okay, I was really tired, and I got all my serves over." And so it's that self-reflection, which we're in a culture where it's like, be humble and don't share what it is you did good. But she would point at you and be like, "What did you do good?" And you had to answer. And then the next one, she would point at someone and say, "We." And then that person had to say, "What as a squad did we do good?" So you're focusing on someone else, you're focusing on yourself, and then you're focusing on the squad. Well, after the season, I asked her about it, and she showed me this list that she had. She had all of our names on there, and she was actually marking down who she was asking these questions to. So we thought it was random, but she was actually going through so that nobody got left out. That at the end of a few practices, everybody had been pointed at to share what they had noticed about the team. And our morale, I think, was very much tied into that 4 or 5 minutes after practice. She wasn't into these post-practice talks and 15-minute of just, this is what we need to do, and here's who we are as a team. She was like, you guys talk. And we did, and we built up each other through that stuff. But what happens is that permeates into practice, where we're now allowed to see and celebrate the good things that other players are doing. So I can be like, oh, Clint, dude, that was awesome, bro. I really saw you working hard right there. Eric, you're doing a good job. Hey, as a team, I think we're doing really well. You start focusing on that stuff because what you focus on manifests. And so if you focus on all the negative, you become a very negative team. If you focus on the positive, well, you get the inverse effect. Now you're focusing on the positive, and positive things are happening.
I also think it gets you out of your shell to be able to talk about those things and feeling comfortable giving a compliment, because a lot of times kids just don't feel comfortable pointing out, hey, Susie's doing a really great job, or hey, Johnny, boy, he's really working hard. We don't often get those opportunities to praise others. And then a lot of times even, I think about talking about ourselves, we're taught to be humble, and there's a lot of, if you watch professional athletes on TV, a lot of times you see kids trying to emulate some of the things that professional athletes do. And that's not really what you want kids doing. You want kids to be thinking about some of those character traits that they're working on, such as, again, I'm working hard, or I'm really putting in the effort here. And maybe I missed 5 left-handed layups in a row, but I'm shooting every single one with my left hand. And those are the kinds of things that you try to get kids to see and recognize that, hey, I'm really doing a good job at these things. Because a lot of times their confidence, especially with younger kids and even up, all the way through the professional level, it's easy to have your confidence shaken. And sometimes we tend to focus on all the things that we need to do better, and we forget about all the things that we do well. And this is a great activity for reminding individuals and the team of, hey, there are lots of things that we do well. I love to use it, and I use it all the time, but I love it especially after losing a game. That we'll do it in sort of the post-game, wrap up. We get done, and you go sit off on the side, and everybody's talking about it. And so, you're a little down because you lost the game, and all of a sudden you say, okay, who has something nice to say about one of their teammates? Who saw something nice that, something good that somebody did? And now suddenly hands are shooting up in the air and say, I saw this person do that. And I saw her do that. And I saw him do that. And it just takes what was potentially a negative situation into one where we recognize that maybe the result that we wanted on the scoreboard wasn't there, but we were able to still pick out lots of things that we did well and that we can continue to build on, so that, the next time we can continue to work and get better. And who knows, at that point, maybe the results will be different on the scoreboard. But it's just a really good activity. James, it's been a pleasure to have you on. We're coming up on about an hour. I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about all the great things that you're doing with Unleash the Athlete. After you left IMG, you went out and on your own started. Thanks for listening. My name is James Leith. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter @JamesLeith, or you can shoot me a text, 805-242-2575. Remember, there's an athlete in all of us. Unleash the athlete today.